Welcome.
Welcome, beautiful Eigen people.
Yes, to another episode of Eigenbros. Today, we're discussing consciousness.
Ooh, hippie.
Spooky. You're afraid of what's inside. What is this ghost in the machine? That's what you need to ask yourself. You know, ghost in the shell.
Ghost in the shell.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I posed this topic because I feel like our friends at Beyond the Physics are going to be doing a more in-depth discussion about this. If you're interested, go check them out. Shout out to Joe.
They're doing a book series, right?
Yeah, book series. If you're interested in that, go check that out. Mm-hmm. Those are our friends over at Beyond the Physics. And they kind of invited me to talk about it, and so I was reading a little bit, and I thought, well, maybe Terence might have an interesting take on some of this stuff.
All right.
So I certainly did. I mean, I had, especially from a physicist perspective, I think it's rather interesting because you have guys. I mean, we're just going to jump right into it.
Yeah, of course.
There are guys in physics that have tried to approach this in a more rigorous way, right?
Yeah.
So first off, your impression of the field of studying consciousness up until the point where physicists got here, because I just showed you an introduction, I guess, of this the more prominent theory, which is integrated information theory.
Okay,
which was posited.
I missed that.
Which was posited by a physicist, and you were like, "Wow, this is definitely the markings of a
neuroscientist."
Oh, I see. So it was the last guy we saw in the video. Okay, yeah. Just for the audience, Juan showed me like 3 or 4, was it?
3 or 4 videos.
3 or 4 videos of a bunch of guys who were talking about consciousness. It was kind of a mixed bag because you showed me like 2 physicists and maybe 2 other
non-physicists.
Okay, yeah.
Very true, yeah.
Yeah. So you're asking me what do I think? What was my take on the last guy?
Yeah, because I think your take on the non-physicist approach to consciousness is what I think most physicists see when they look at people trying to tackle the theory of consciousness or something.
Yeah, which is the hippy-dippy version that I don't like.
Yeah, so what is this that you don't like?
From the non-physics perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the non-physics perspective of consciousness is always philosophy, pretty much, right?
Okay.
It's some kind of metaphysical, I mean, even when it's still rooted in physics, like, when we saw the last guy, what was his name? David Chalmers or something. Mm-hmm. He was a philosopher, but he talks about it in a way that's kind of like doesn't seem very enlightening or fruitful. It's not actually trying to solve a problem. It's just talking around the problem as philosophers do. Sorry, I'm philosophers, but I kind of these are my true feelings. I don't really see much use in philosophy these days unless it's applied to ethics in some sense.
I don't want you holding back, Terence.
Okay, I'm not going to. Gloves are off.
Yeah. Sorry, people, if you don't like what you hear, I'm sorry.
You can leave.
Well, no, we don't want to be rude, but know,
I'm kidding.
Just listen if you'd like. If not, then of course, you can rage out on me in the comments and I'll read them.
Yeah, leave a dislike and a comment.
Yeah, we're all good with that.
So what it is that the philosopher's approach is pretty much this. It's like talking about the problem without actually trying to approach solving it. So what they do is, if you notice with the philosopher guy, he's kind of talking about like, he was saying, let me try to remember exactly what he was saying. He was talking in a quantum framework, which was already a problem because he was saying like consciousness, he was trying to link consciousness and quantum mechanics, which is kind of one of these already problematic things.
Already esoteric thing.
It already shows his lack of understanding quantum mechanics, in my opinion. I thought we've already resolved this, where consciousness and quantum mechanics aren't necessarily the thing that's correlated. It's just the fact that a particle is collapsing into a new state from a superposition has nothing to do with the fact that a conscious entity is observing it.
Right.
It's just the fact that the system is now being measured. When you're looking at an object, the photons are bouncing off and going into your eyes.
You interacted already.
You interacted with the system, right? So it has nothing to do with right. It has nothing to do with the conscious observer, right? You need to measure a system in order to know anything about it. So that's the whole breaking the or collapsing the wave function, as they call it, in physics. So it's like the philosopher's approach I don't like because they don't have any tools that scientists have. He's not actually trying to break down the problem in a solvable way because he's lacking the framework to be able to do that. Mm-hmm. I wish philosophers would do more of that, but I don't think they have the tool set. I think if you're a philosopher doing or attacking deep physics problems, just become a physicist.
Yeah.
If you're going to be one like that, just be like a Sean Carroll. Sean Carroll's almost like a modern philosopher these days anyway, because he's working on quantum interpretations, right? So that to me is more legitimate. I'm like, if there's really such a little need for philosophers unless they're in ethics.
Yeah.
You don't need them really that much in science.
True.
Because that's just a theoretical physicist.
Right. I mean, there are physicists that jump into the philosophy realm, into metaphysics in a sense, but it's after they're done doing physics. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah. I also don't like the term metaphysics either, because then that's like, well, I don't know. Because it is fun to talk about things outside of the Big Bang, let's say, or it's fun to talk about things like
consciousness.
Huh?
Like consciousness.
Yeah, exactly. But I still think consciousness is a non-metaphysical problem because I still see it as a physical thing.
Of course.
For me, because consciousness doesn't lie outside of the universe. Mm-hmm. So when I think of things as metaphysical, it means it lies outside of the realm of the universe.
Oh,
I think we will. My guess is we will be able to understand and explain consciousness fully once we have all the tools in neuroscience, physics, maybe even computational tools. Mm-hmm. Once we have all those, I think it will be explainable within the universe.
Right.
The Big Bang, what happens outside after the Big Bang, I think that's metaphysical because I don't think we'll be able to explain that unless we can leave the universe.
Yeah. So for those of you listening, we have purposefully omitted a definition for consciousness because it's a rather like ill-defined thing still. There's still working theories about what it is.
Yeah. Well, we can agree that it's in some emergent phenomenon.
Right. And I mean, you can look at I name dropped integrated information theory. That's one way that it can be broken down, the perceptory experience of consciousness. And there's a physicist, I think there's 3 people that came up with this theory that have like this, they lay it out in a paper. Mm-hmm. That they try to quantify consciousness as a function, like they call it phi.
Yeah. Do you know the guy's name?
No, I don't.
Okay.
It's 3 names that are rather exotic.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Okay. Well, you want to just show him and I can read him maybe? Because where is he from? Can you tell the origin?
Of the names?
Yeah.
No.
Because I imagine that's why you're having a problem, because it's like weird names, right?
Yeah.
Well, I know a couple languages, so if you show me, I might be able to figure out how to say it.
Okay, all right. Well, I mean, it was mainly proposed by neuroscientist Giulio Tononi, if I'm pronouncing
sounds
that right.
Italian, right?
Yeah, in 2004.
So Giulio Tononi, maybe?
Giulio? Okay.
G-I?
Giulio. There you go. And there was a recent theory proposed.
Giulio Totoni, I would say.
Yeah, and the recent
Giulio Totoni.
The recent iteration has been modified in 2014. So it's been modified recently, and he constructed this algorithm, or like a step process, to try to conceptualize consciousness in some mathematical way.
Okay.
And there are some physicists that kind of hinted at this, like I think I showed you Max Tegmark.
Tegmark.
Yeah.
Swedish, I think.
Yeah.
Or like Emirates Marrow, Swede or something.
I think he's in Cambridge. Oh, he did a TEDx talk on Cambridge, and you can check that video out. But it's not very. I mean, it's illuminating if you're like new to this stuff. But he also takes an approach where it's how would you say, more qualitative than quantitative. So,
which is why I liked his less.
Yeah,
because it was more. I liked it still because he had some interesting things in there. Specifically, I'm not sure what was it.
Well, he's still trying to define consciousness in a more physical sense.
Yeah, definitely more qualitative argument. I think the Giulio Giuliani or Totoni, whatever his name is.
Yeah.
He had the best approach to me because his was more quantitative in trying, or it was more in trying to break down the problem of consciousness even smaller. So it's more reductionist because he took the approach to try to quantify what does it even mean to have an experience.
Yes.
And then he divided that into sections, which I thought was that was the way to attack the problem, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. Probably the way that I would look at it as well as a physicist, because, you want to be able to reduce a problem down to its simplest elements to be able to solve it with the most quantitative approach that you can take. And that, I thought, was the most useful approach, in my opinion. Although the qualitative arguments are important, but I think consciousness is such a hard problem these days that the qualitative arguments are going to be way further down the line. Because, the problem of consciousness can span so many areas. Not only physics, expands philosophy, physics, computer science, even neuroscience. This is truly one of these problems that is super cross, what'd you call it?
Disciplinary.
Disciplinary, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, this problem is going to be one that I have a feeling is not going to be solved for a very long time. Not within our lifetime, I would imagine. Maybe, but I don't think so.
Well, just to kind of delve into the integrated information theory, there were a couple axioms that they followed, and one of them is the intrinsic existence. I would say maybe axiom principle or something. Consciousness exists. That's the intrinsic existence axiom. That each experience is actual, that it's happening, and it's a fact.
Okay, so this is trying to get around all the simulation stuff.
Maybe.
Okay.
Maybe so.
These are just axioms.
For this, if you're trying to simulate consciousness in some sense.
Okay, well, this seems like it's just laying down the axioms, because none of those things can be proven, I don't think.
No. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
But these are taken as axioms in this working theory.
Okay.
Meaning that, like your experience exists from its own intrinsic perspective, independent of external observers. So, yeah. And the second axiom is composition. So, meaning that consciousness is structured. Does that make sense? No?
No.
Each experience is composed of multiple phenomenological distinctions. Do I need to give an example?
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess meaning that within one experience, you can distinguish a book, a blue color, a blue book, like a left side or right side, that kind of thing.
Oh, this is the Totoni.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Theory.
So you can make distinctions of things, like, you know what I mean? Like there's structure in the consciousness can interpret structure, differences in things meaningfully.
It can meaningfully distinguish between objects.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe
that's what they mean. That's what he means by consciousness.
Okay.
It's structured. Right? You wouldn't think so?
It sounds like something I have to read more to really have a good way to say it. We can stress this,
because this is kind of why I wanted to posit it to you, because it's like it's some of these axioms, they can be tested. Like,
okay.
Because can you see consciousness not being structured in some sense?
Structured is the word I'm trying to really understand.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Why he used that?
Yeah. I'm sure it's probably because he wants to make it as general as possible. That's the problem. And when you have things that are really general, especially when it has to do with shit like this, like I have to really try to think of all the exceptions and things, right, to understand what he really means.
Yeah. Well, the example they give is that your conscious being can distinguish things in its environment,
specifically objects, or even ideas and things.
Just yeah.
Okay.
It can be abstractions. It can be physical things as well.
Okay.
In a sense, it may be more. It may be under the realm.
And this is an axiom.
Yeah.
Okay.
It may be more. It may be under the umbrella of processing, in my opinion, like a processing information. Right. If you look at this purely as an algorithm of sorts, it can. I guess it's saying that.
Yes, I think so.
It should be. Your conscious being should be able to process information meaningfully.
Yeah, so then leads me to another question of that's kind of a weird axiom to have. That's another thing. I don't know if I would obviously pick that as an axiom because you would kind of
process information.
No, that things can be distinguished. Yeah, this is interesting because these are axioms that are. This is such a high-level problem. I feel like that a lot of this stuff I could just get caught just staring off into space, thinking about why he would even choose that as an axiom. So,
but as far as like building, if you're building a consciousness from scratch, you would say
I don't know if I would
process information.
Yeah, I don't know if I would necessarily include an axiom of distinguishability per se. At least not.
Just me building it right now in my own head.
Yeah.
So maybe he went through a bunch of rigor to come to that as an axiom.
But would you agree so far?
Yeah,
As a running
I
definition.
agree. I just don't know why he would choose that as an axiom.
Gotcha.
Per se.
Okay, so the next one is information, meaning consciousness is specific. Each experience is unique in the particular way it is.
Each experience is unique.
Yeah. Meaning there's very little differentiation. Meaning like your experience right now,
If it's unique, there should be a lot of differentiation.
No. Meaning that like your experience is you're taking in the perception of this room at a certain
Yes.
light angle. Light angles are coming in a certain way. You're
Yeah.
experiencing the environment in your own framework that's very unique to you.
I see.
You cannot duplicate.
True.
Right.
But then that means they are very distinguishable.
Your another conscious experience. What do you mean?
Yes, so your conscious experience is very distinguishable from someone else's thing.
Right.
And you said it was indistinguishable or distinguishable?
I think I meant to say this.
Okay.
No, we're saying that there's differentiation between. Yeah.
There is differentiation.
There is
Yes.
differentiation. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Heavy differentiation.
Yeah.
Almost complete uniqueness.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Uniqueness and existence theorem.
Yeah.
Okay.
For mathematics. I never understood that. This is embarrassing, but I never really understood like why they decided to make a whole theorem based on uniqueness and existence, but whatever.
In mathematics?
Yeah, mathematics.
Bro, because mathematicians just be doing all kinds of shit, right?
They can do whatever the fuck they want.
Yeah. And
Build any universe they want, whatever.
Right. And one of the most important ones here that this professor adds is integration axiom, that consciousness is unified. Each experience is irreducible and cannot be subdivided into non-interdependent disjoint subsets. Does that make sense?
No.
Like you cannot
Too
remove,
many words.
meaning you can, if you removed the visual aspect of your brain, the part of your brain that handles like visual integration of your experience, that part of your consciousness cannot exist outside of itself, because there are parts of it that your brain takes all this visual information, all this auditory information. Imagine, because light travels at the speed of light, and sound travels at the speed of sound, which is much less. Perceptively, you're experiencing light hitting your retinas first, and then sound coming in second. Your brain is integrating that information.
Perceptually, not always, though. I mean, most times perceptually, I'd say we're experiencing light and sound at the same time.
Exactly, but your brain does that integration for you. There's never a lagging effect. Because imagine, like,
I think that also could just be the fact that the processing or the number, let's say, like if in computers, it'd be the clock cycle, right? Our clock cycle isn't fast enough to be able to distinguish that, right? Because if you only have a clock that can measure 3 times a second, right? Then it doesn't matter when the information comes in, because the bottleneck is just
You're
whenever
saying
the
the
clock is
sampling
happening.
rate.
The sampling rate, exactly.
Gotcha. Well, like, I mean,
So I don't know if it's any clever trick of the brain.
It could just be the brain is just too slow, right?
We can only literally see like 60 frames per second, right?
Humans, we're not even 60. I mean, movies were shot in 24 frames per second, right? And we never saw any, flip book
Right.
effects. So I mean, it's just probably our clock speed just isn't that great.
maybe it could be reduced to that.
But maybe not. Maybe you're right also, because we can literally take in trillions of photons, probably, right?
But it seems
Somehow that's
rather, but I'm
processed. I
saying
don't
your
know.
experience seems integrated to the environment. Like there's no lag effect in a sense. Like if I touch your toe, there's no perceptive difference of like there being it's almost instantaneous at which like the effect happens. That I touch your toe, or you touch your toe, and it reaches the signal of your brain in.
And you're talking about the qualitative effect, or you're talking about the quantitative effect?
I guess maybe both. I mean, I'm just saying the brain.
Because the quantitative effect is not that impressive, right? Because it's like once you touch the toe, your brain is just sending literally an electrical signal to your brain. It just says toe is touched.
Right, but it integrates this information about all these different types of information, right? Like the pressure.
Oh, I see.
The temperature.
Yeah.
Like, if a sound is emulated when you press your toe, you laugh or something.
Yeah.
Like it's just,
and even the context.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Sexual, non-sexual. So like, there's a lot of stuff that's like integrated in your experience. And I guess that's what he's making a distinction, that the brain consciousness integrates
all of these things.
Yeah. Into one meaningful picture.
I see.
Now
I got you. That's interesting. I would then of course, now I'm thinking of what would be the exceptions to that rule. I don't know if I have the time to think about that.
Can you have a conscious experience without integrating
it?
Now,
what I was thinking was the split brain thing that you showed me. Perhaps.
Right. So the split brain.
But I guess you could have a split consciousness, and I guess I wouldn't go against the definition.
So the split difference here was that there's there's a case study right, of a woman who gets brain damage from the left hemisphere. Is that right?
I think she gets brain damage in the right hemisphere because the right hemisphere controls your left side.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they show her two pictures, one of a burning house and one of a non-burning house, and they say, which house feels safer to you? Now, she can only
But the burning house, to clarify, only shows fire on the left side of the picture. Both the two housing pictures look indistinguishable on the right-hand side. The flames are only visible on the left-hand side of one.
Because of her brain damage, she can't see that one, right? Consciously.
Right.
She's not aware of it.
Yeah. Her left part of her body, nothing's wrong with it, but for some reason there's just this disconnect where something is not processing.
Well, no, something is processing.
Something's processing, but she's not consciously aware of the processes.
Yeah. And that leaves her, when they ask her to pick a house that she would rather buy or something, she always ends up picking the house that is not burning.
Right.
And she is not aware consciously why she's doing that. Which I mean, I guess kind of flies into the face of like, well, I mean, your brain is integrating information, but it's not, you're not consciously aware of it.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
Right.
It's a weird...
It's an unconscious process, much like breathing or, blinking.
Yeah, but that's like... That's kind of... Meaning your perception is so skewed. Because so many things that you do in your day-to-day life is... It just means that your brain sees things that you might not consciously be aware of.
Right.
Right?
Right. But then somehow it chooses to push certain things into your conscious mind.
Yeah.
And others not.
Well, it makes you choose to pick things that you might not have a reason for. Do you see what I'm saying?
Right.
That's kind of the mystery of it. That's like, okay, I'm doing things that maybe...
Oh, that's interesting, because then how is it... So it's pushing that information into your
will. Yeah,
that's really interesting. Now you almost broke my brain there, because I'm like, how is it that she's consciously choosing something, yet she's unconscious of doing it, or not consciously doing it,
the reason why she's doing it. Yeah, which brings me to another case.
Okay, so I guess you can consciously do things yet not understand the reasoning behind it,
right? But there's a good reason. But there's a good reason for it.
Yeah.
At the end of the day. Because, like, I mean, the scientists doing this study know why she's doing it. They have an outsider's perspective. And you begin to question why, okay, are the things that we do more unconscious behaviors being fleshed out and us not being conscious of them? Yes. And I think I'm in the camp of yes, a lot of them are probably. More than we would like to admit. Unconscious manifestations of our unconscious or subconscious?
Well, I think some of the things that we're saying, like it's like this weird fine line between conscious and unconscious, right? Mm-hmm. I feel like I'm almost losing the idea here, but
go for it.
I do think a lot of our behaviors and things are done in a way that is not. It's like we are given the illusion of conscious choice almost in some sense, and I don't think this is a very controversial thought. I think it's kind of almost accepted in by many people now. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think we're much more tied to our chemical processes and things than we would care to admit.
And there's a lot less freedom of choice than we believe.
Right.
Although I'm not saying there isn't, because I think there can be, like, for instance, we know mathematically saddle points exist, right?
So saddle points can almost give you I'm sure if you had enough saddle points along one line, so let's say you had a saddle point, and then that saddle point led to another saddle point, led to another one, then that can domino into a bunch of different conscious or choices, right?
Mm-hmm. What Terence views by saddle points are like points of minimizing your like energy or something.
Well, specifically, I mean like if you thought of a maximum. Mm-hmm. This is like has to do with like chaos theory. Mm-hmm. I think they call it a it
starts with a B.
Butterfly effect?
No, but it is kind of like that. Well, not exactly, but similar. It's where you're on a saddle point. You can either go down one side of the saddle.
Oh, I see.
Like literally think of a saddle like a horse saddle.
Yeah.
You can go down one side of the saddle. Let's say that's side A, or you can go down the other side, side B.
Yeah.
But then side A and side B lead to two different pathways. If you're like a marble sitting on a saddle.
Yeah.
So sometimes it just takes a very small thing to push it either way, but still that can manifest into a large or different choice, right?
Yeah.
So I think saddle points do exist, and we know, of course, quantum mechanics has some randomness to it as well, because of, the particle being in a superposition of states and only gets measured when it has some kind of interaction. So whatever my point was,
you're like there is some randomness built into the universe.
Yeah. To where we have some kind of.
The universe is not completely deterministic.
Yeah.
So there is some wiggle room of free. Yeah. There's some semblance of free will.
Right. But I think at our level, the classical scale, we're seeing less of those distinctions. We're in the realm of where choice is limited. Mm-hmm. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
I think choice is really reserved mostly for the quantum scale and things like that. Yeah, and we can already see this, the fact that we can quantify classical systems so deterministically, right? The fact that you can write equations for things shows you how deterministic things actually are, because you can literally reverse engineer how things happen based on their paths. And, if you have enough quantified data, you can extrapolate how they move and how they function. Mm-hmm. So that's pretty much deterministic right there.
Yeah.
At least at the classical level.
Yeah. Well,
which is relevant to us, right?
Yeah.
That's our relevant sphere of influence. So
so I just want to get to the last one, the last axiom.
Oh, what's the time we're at, by the way?
We're almost 30 minutes.
Okay, not bad.
So the last one is consciousness is definite. This is the exclusion axiom, meaning that like our experience, our consciousness is spatially and temporally, I guess, integrated. Like your subjective experience is you're not taking in information like
one snapshot at a time.
Yeah, one snapshot at a time. Like if you look at the white on the walls, mm-hmm. and at one moment you don't see white, and then you see all the actual filter of all the colors and the white. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Because the actuality, we know this from physics, the white light is the spectrum of colors.
Yeah.
Our brain doesn't do that. Our brain doesn't show us all the colors.
Right. It concatenates it into one single white color.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, that should tell you enough that the brain is doing something funny.
Yeah, the brain is really interesting because the brain is almost like, I think by all metrics, like for a human, if we looked at it, we'd be like, oh, this system's shitty, right? This thing is rife with all kinds of issues. Mm-hmm. But actually, I think that's where we as humans are not advanced enough to understand yet, that imperfect systems are actually probably going to be more powerful in the end, because the way that we build things is almost like to perfection. We want computers to remember everything. We want computers to always operate doing this in a very it's like a computer has to remember everything with perfect precision, right? Needs to store bits with perfect precision, ideally. That's how we want it, ideally. Of course, it's not how it actually works in real life, but that's the idea. With things that are like the brain, probably one of the most impressive machines that exists. The brain is clearly imperfect in so many ways. Like optical illusions are a thing because the brain is shitty, I mean, or the brain fails in certain things.
Processing certain.
Yeah, the brain actually like makes up information, fills in the blanks. It knows how to fill in the blanks in a very educated way.
Yeah.
But then it breaks in certain areas, right?
Yeah,
we don't take in all information.
There's an ugly blind spot that it freaked me out when I found this out. But if you turn all the way to the left and you put your finger a certain way, you will not see it anymore.
Oh yeah,
like
that's literally a blind spot.
That blew my mind, because like your brain, it tries to integrate the information to try to in real time try to fool you or try to like not fool you, but it tries to map where your finger might be, and you don't even perceive it. But like you will, if you move your finger, you will lose it at some point if you look this way. Sometimes you can see like a literal black spot. If you turn your eye all the way, it freaked me out when somebody told me this. I was like, because you get this perception that your reality is integrated, but then you really see the holes in the matrix, so to say. Yeah.
But it's actually not a bug. I think it's a feature, right? Because humans have been made to extrapolate information. This is how we survive, right? We extrapolate like a rustling in the bush could be a fucking saber tooth. So I'm not going to jump in the bush. I'm not going to go near that bush. So that actually, I think, helps us more than it hurts us, right? Which is probably why we kept these things.
Okay.
And those brain failings are actually what makes us more powerful systems. And this is what I don't think humans have understood yet, because we're such in our infancy computationally and building these kind of, artificial intelligent type systems. We're operating in the framework still of like these perfect calculating machines. But if you think about it, like computational machines are so like inefficient, right? In many ways, like they're efficient compared to other machines maybe, but like the human mind is very efficient, I would imagine.
Right.
Of course, I'm not a neuroscientist, so I don't know the extent. I'm talking out of my ass a little bit, but I was talking with Juan earlier that I was saying that the human brain is a classical machine. It's not a quantum machine. We don't need a quantum computer in our brains to work. Sure, there's like particles and things, but a brain communicates with electrical signals. We've done this already for decades, right? In electrical circuits, you can literally get voltage values from the brain and predict certain things. So the brain is a classical system, yet it's one of the most impressive computational machines that exists. And why is that?
Yeah.
And I think that's because of the shortcuts and the energy efficiency of the brain, where it knows how to maximize its return on investment for certain tasks. That a classical machine, like a typical computer that we have, does not, because we're still in the mode of trying to get a computer to do everything as perfectly as possible.
Yeah, it doesn't do anything. It does it actually, functionally, inefficiently.
Yeah.
Right? Because
like a computer will look at certain things and still go through the hard route of doing it.
Right.
Whereas like a human, we can take easy shortcut paths to do things just as with like 90% the return on investment, right? So a computer does things the hard way, but it does things the quote unquote right way, I guess, to get, more accuracy and consistency, I guess we could say.
Like there's another concept in this all that kind of that I think you and I are familiar with, and most listeners might be familiar with, but that's this notion of consciousness being substrate independent.
Substrate independent.
Yeah. You know what I mean?
No.
Like meaning that this one philosopher talked about Plato's, how he ingested basically some LSD, and he kind of had this sensory experience. And this
Plato didn't ingest no LSD, bro.
Well, he drank this thing.
He drank some hemlock, maybe. Or something.
Yeah, he drank this like potion.
In memory of Socrates.
He drank this potion that back then that may have had ergot in it, and he may have had hallucinogenic episode induced by the active compound in LSD. So,
that's what you mean. Okay.
Yeah. So this, and it's funny because when you talk about psychedelics, we'll probably get into this in more detail, but I just wanted to say that Plato kind of had this sense of dualism that pervades our notion of consciousness in the self. Do you know what I mean?
No, can you go further?
That the mind is separate from matter.
Yeah.
That there is this sense that your ego is separate.
I don't think he's an originator of that, though, either.
No, but he was one of the...
Because who's the brain in the vat guy?
It was Descartes.
Okay, yeah,
So he
he's
came
before.
after. No, he came after.
Is he really?
Yeah. Descartes?
Oh, you're right. You're right.
Yeah.
My bad.
Because Descartes was like one of those old school physics guys.
Yeah, you're right. And Plato was long before any physics was happening.
Yeah, but I mean, this was apparently motivated by his experimentation with like magic potions back in the day. But just to kind of go as an aside, hallucinogens are going to be studied further in probing the limits of consciousness, or at least our experience with consciousness.
Yeah.
You know?
They kind of already do that with... Well, I don't know about consciousness. Sorry, go ahead.
No, because consciousness is interesting. Well, when you take hallucinogens, I feel like it breaks down that barrier of you almost see the brain doing the unconscious functions. At least when I speak to people that have had hallucinogenic experiences,
that's an interesting way of looking at it.
They talk about things like, oh, I see patterns. I see like things that I feel like they have ego dissolution, right?
Yeah.
Where they don't feel separate from matter itself.
That was probably the most striking thing to me when I've done psychedelics was that I was like, I can't believe that I feel it's like you literally feel like you are a chair. You feel no distinction
You
between
are a chair.
You feel no distinction between you and a chair and you and anything else. Like you literally feels like every single thing that exists or anything that's even inanimate is the same as you. And that's like such a feeling that you can never understand unless you've actually done psychedelics. And you're like, wow, this is really just shows you that the reality that we live in is just completely just something that only is for humans and like conscious entities. It's like the real world is so like, it's so much more than just us.
Yeah. It's interesting because humans aren't the only things that also have noticed this, like, I guess not ego disillusionment, but this probing of like reality in some sense with hallucinogens, because I feel like it sort of lifts the veil or of what reality is supposed to be, because we get such a primed experience, almost like a operating system, right? We get such a curtailed experience to survive the world.
Yeah.
And
it's built on social hierarchies and climbing the social ladder.
Yeah.
And, we're so into survival, right? We have to do all these kind of human things to be able to survive within the human realm. But then when you take a psychedelic, it breaks that from you, and you're like, it puts you into the real universe for a second, where it's like it shows you your real place. It's like your little human world doesn't really matter that much in the grand scheme. It's like, I'll just give you a little glimpse. It's like being like taken like in Flatland, a sphere takes the square guy, or sphere takes a square, I think is his name, out for a second and shows him how Flatland really is. Yeah. It's like, you are only a small part of it, buddy. It's like your world is one part. Yes, it's important in its own right, but just you remember, like, there's so much more to this than just you.
Yeah, and that goes to the...
We're getting hippie again.
No, yeah, but that's just kind of like the probe of testing the limits of consciousness and all this other stuff that I think it will further become a very important topic in the future. But I feel like...
Did you have something else?
Yeah, I feel like
I feel like this is one-sided, though. Maybe I should ask you some questions, Juan.
Well, no, I mean, I just wanted to see, like, consciousness seems to have this, like, I guess we kind of talked about this, but I just kind of wanted to add that consciousness seems to have this superficial layer that has this illusion of free will, just to kind of add to that.
The superficial layer. I guess the thing is, though, I think consciousness needs to have, like, its own layer. Because I think this is the thing is, I think when we were talking about the efficiency of the brain, the brain is so efficient because it gets rid of all the shit that doesn't matter. It doesn't take in information. I mean, literally, brains get rid of neurons if you don't use them enough, right?
Yeah, true.
The brain is all about efficiency. So I think in order for us to operate like this, we need that efficiency, that low energy state to be able to to use all of our resources towards the things that are important. So the brain naturally is going to be pushed into a very small pocket of things that should be conscious about. And it's like why don't we see like infrared and ultraviolet? Because the brain doesn't need that. We figured out the optimum frequency of seeing, so this is what we see. We don't need to see infrared rays. You know, if we actually saw, like, this is the typical human way that we do things now. Is like we would program a computer to see infrared and ultraviolet and all this stuff. It's like you don't need all this junk, right? If we saw all that stuff,
information overload.
Yeah, we would just be overwhelmed with information all day because we would be seeing our Wi-Fi signals, we'd be seeing our microwave signals, we'd be seeing all this crap. It's just like we don't need all this information, right? Our body heat. It's just like it's such an overwhelming amount of information. It actually detracts from what you really want.
Right, exactly.
So consciousness, I think, naturally is going to be pushed into what's relevant for whatever the entity is.
Right.
For us, it's, of course, natural selection driven, right? So for what's relevant to us is whatever doesn't get us killed and eaten by a saber tooth.
So if you take a brain and put it in another planet, not on Earth, it would look different, you're saying?
I would imagine so.
You would take in different.
And that's actually one thought I had while watching this, because I was like, you know, what if an alien species had no sunlight really or something? Yeah. You know, I don't know if there might be a prerequisite to where you need sunlight to live, but what if they just had really low light or something, or some kind of artificial environment?
They have these extreme like examples in the deep in the bottomless pits of the Earth's, I would say, oceans. You know, they have these examples of like extremophiles, these like organisms that survive in really crazy environments, no sunlight, nothing. All they get is thermal heat. All they get is energy from heat, and they actually can convert that energy into useful energy using like sulfates and shit.
Crazy.
They and it tells you that life is doing something that's, I mean, it's mechanical and stuff, and in some ways, you know, you start probing at like consciousness and stuff, and like how it's able to, it's wild stuff. But just to kind of stick to,
you start to get really into a domain of like, what are the limits of human, or the limits of life, really, right? If only we just had one more species that we knew of that was sentient, like, because the unfortunate thing is this is all just this is almost like not metaphysics, but this is all like
there's
imagination, speculation.
But there is a good example of a case where you have locked-in syndrome, right? Where you have somebody who's paralyzed and has a very limited capacity. They're almost in a vegetative state, right?
Well, they're in a vegetative state on the outside, but then they have conscious thought on the inside.
Yeah. So, but this is a good example of like, how can you test consciousness, really?
Yeah.
Is consciousness an observable? Can you say that? Because what differentiates conscious matter between just regular matter, right? So like if you have, for instance, trees, they just figured out that trees actually communicate with each other.
Yeah.
They actually discovered that like you can, if you have different neighboring species of trees, some of them will coexist. They'll send, if one of them needs carbon, the other tree will send carbon, and the other tree,
wow, I didn't know that.
They actually communicate to each other in a meaningful way that they actually know what the other plant needs. It's a sort of symbiotic
plant consciousness. So there you go, vegans. You're killing plants that have consciousness as well.
I mean, in some sense, you can argue that, you know, it doesn't look like it has consciousness, but I mean, because what does it mean to be a tree?
Yeah,
right.
And arguably, then it starts to get into what really is consciousness, because like a virus is considered non-conscious, right?
Yeah.
But a virus, I would say seems more conscious than a tree, because at least a virus has some kind of movability, but people would consider that non-conscious.
Yeah. I mean, it's rather strange, the distinctions to make between each thing.
And honestly, I think that's kind of one of the big links between really qualitatively understanding consciousness, is to be able to understand, okay, what are the real separators between a virus, a tree, and like the next step up to maybe a single-celled organism. Because I think generally people would consider a single-celled organism like, or maybe like a bacterium. They would consider a bacterium to be conscious.
Well, so, it looks rather conscious sometimes.
Yeah, because it literally will eat another cell. It will literally have a function and do some kind of task. But why would it be that?
Like, it makes sense to be if you can imagine being a bacteriophage or something, just like running around eating other
right. But I would imagine, why can't you imagine being a virus or a tree?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, so
it just looks immaterial. It looks material like nothing.
Right. It looks less conscious, but then that's really the key to understanding it qualitatively, I would imagine, because it's like, then where is it the limit of consciousness? Like, where's the limit between a virus and a bacterium?
Yeah. These are all questions that they're asking themselves.
Yeah.
In the book that I'm reading, they at least posit the question. Here's a question that I thought was interesting.
Yeah.
And this has to do more with the physics, and we have 4 states of matter, right?
Yep. Well, yeah, on paper, but we really have way more than that.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the 4 popular ones are, solid, gaseous, liquid, and then plasma, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Do you think consciousness is a state of matter? Because it's an arrangement of atoms.
Hippie as hell.
No, but I know, but it's because you think about indistinguishable particles or just atoms moving around.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, but in this particular configuration, it makes something discernibly different.
Right, I see what you're saying. That kind of is almost a callback to the whole Max Tegmark thing, I think, because he was talking about basically consciousness has to do with structure.
Yeah.
And all these things arise from structure. And I see what you're saying. I think there is some truth to it, actually, in some sense. But I think you'd have to kind of give it a little more to it than that. Although maybe at the end of the day, you could break it down as that. But there is definitely a dynamic component to consciousness. And I guess you could say that the more dynamic a structure is, perhaps. But I don't know if you could say that just because a structure is more dynamic means it's going to become more conscious. But I do think you need to have a dynamic structure. Well, maybe not, though. But yeah, I guess you do. I think you do need a dynamic structure for consciousness to arise.
And what do you mean by that?
Motion.
Okay.
Simply
like
motion.
Moving particles.
There needs to be something that has a way to cause an effect on something.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, if you want to think of the simplest way, I'll give you a simple example. Like, the fact that we have a positive proton and a negative electron, those two in a near vicinity will attract each other.
Yeah,
that's a dynamic relationship. So I think necessarily for consciousness to arrive, there needs to be, I would imagine, at least 2 constituent things that have to have some kind of dynamic relationship for consciousness to even arrive or arise. Mm-hmm. Because I would imagine a collection of neutrons, well, even maybe a collection of neutrons. Now this is where I'm getting because a collection of neutrons, you're going to see that if they get big enough, then gravity is going to actually have some kind of effect. So I don't know.
Well, this is
maybe scrap all that.
This is Boltzmann. This is actually This is an interesting question because Boltzmann actually asked himself this because it's a statistical mechanics thing.
Yeah.
Because if the brain is an arrangement of atoms in a particular configuration, does that mean that consciousness itself is a sort of state of matter? Because you arrange atoms in a certain configuration and you get this weird thing that's
emergent property.
That's not necessarily
a
sum of its constituents.
That's a very nice simplified approach because we could say, just to rephrase that, a solid and a liquid and a gas really are all the same particles, right? But a solid is rearranged in a more rigid, rigid crystal structure. and then a liquid is just a little bit more
energy
added to the system to where it becomes more dynamic, and then that emerges a whole distinctly different thing from a solid. And then a gas is also completely distinctly different in an emergent way.
Energy, yeah.
So I guess, I think that's actually a pretty nice, simple way to say it. Consciousness is an emergent thing. I think that's probably accurate. I think that's the same qualitative argument that Max Tegmark had.
Yeah, but my distinction is that I'm classifying it as a state of matter. That it's attainable to other states of matter.
I would be reserved and hesitant to say that because it's just such a wildly different system that I think it's such a multi-factored problem or such a multifaceted thing that it's disingenuous to call it a state of matter. Maybe it's not, though. Maybe at the end of the day, you could be right in that analysis. But for me, it's such a high-level analysis. I can't, with good faith, call it. I can't co-sign saying it's a state of matter. It's just because clearly consciousness is just such a huge
leap from its
hugely different emergent thing compared to like liquid or gas. Right. That is just too hard to co-opt that statement.
But at the end of the day, I mean, the brain is just an organ that has certain energetic configuration, and it gives rise to matter being perceiving. I don't know. It's just strange. It's a weird organ. I mean, it's just you.
I think at the end of the day, you're probably right. Honestly.
I mean, Boltzmann said that.
But I don't know.
Well, Boltzmann gave this like really dramatic comparison, and I've spoken about it before. But he said at any moment there could be in the blip of existence in the galaxy or in the universe, there could be an arrangement of stars or planets or gaseous clouds or whatever that creates a conscious being for 1 second that can perceive its own existence. Because of the arrangement of atoms. That's kind of like the absurdity.
That's really a stretch.
That's the absurdity. No, but that's the absurdity of the notion of consciousness being just an arrangement of atoms.
Actually, no, maybe it's not a stretch, though. I think I'll justify that statement because if we're willing to say that something like a bacterium is conscious or plants are conscious, maybe there is some kind of really low-level form of consciousness that could be attained by some soup of particles.
Yeah, like in space, right? You have soup of particles and gaseous stuff.
100%, right? Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and say maybe it's possible. Of course, who knows, though, because the thing is we just don't understand the limits. We don't have anywhere near a good enough of a template of what consciousness means for me to be able to, like, even speculate on these things really in any meaningful way.
How would you grade the study of consciousness, and what do you feel like would help illuminate some of this better as a physicist?
Well, I liked Totoni's approach. I think if there were more guys and gals that were serious about approaching consciousness in the way that's going to actually yield some kind of real answers, it's got to be more quantitative arguments like Totoni's, where you're actually trying to break it down in a very reductionist way and tackle small, simpler problems. You know, maybe not try to focus on what is consciousness, but try to focus on what is a experience or something, and try to break down these things into reductionist things. And it can really take people from all fields, as we said. It's such a cross-disciplinary thing. You know, physicists, computer scientists, neuroscientists, you all have a place in this. Maybe even philosophers. Philosophers probably not. I'm sorry, probably not. But anybody who's an actual scientist, you probably have some way to attack this problem. It's just that, you know, as scientists do, you have to make it quantitative. Consciousness is too hard to be qualitative, I think. So you need to really try to reduce this to as small of a problem as possible.
And build up.
It's got to be super, super reductionist because it's just so far away in trying to solve the real problem, right? We need every one of these fields converging in onto what actually consciousness is.
Yeah, I think so too.
I mean, what would you say? Would you attack it in a similar manner, or would you do it?
Definitely. I think the physicist's mindset is to reduce the problem to its basic constituents like that, like, you know, and this is why I have this sort of, I mean, it's not a unique thought that consciousness might be a state of matter, being like, as I've shared, Boltzmann had this same inclination, I guess, or same conclusion.
Yeah.
There are other interpretations, though, or like modalities that, like, for instance, Penrose, another famous physicist known for his twistor theory stuff, right?
Yep.
He says that he thinks the root of consciousness is from quantum mechanics, a quantum mechanical process that happens in the telomeres or something.
Okay.
In the brain. And
This sounds real sketch.
there's some.
This is why you didn't show me his video, huh?
Yeah. I don't think his theory is very well formulated.
Okay.
But I mean, he at least is trying. I commend him in trying.
Yeah.
In trying to find something to explain consciousness.
But he might be in old kook territory now, you think?
Perhaps.
Not to shit on Penrose. I mean, I love the guy. His Road to Reality book.
It's
we don't
over
have
there.
it here.
I have it
Okay.
in my. I have it in my.
Yeah, we
bookshelf.
both own it though.
Oh, you do.
Ideally
Yeah,
enough,
yeah.
it's like the one book that I own.
He's very. There are physicists that are trying, and I think it's more physicists need to, or even neuroscientists need to take this approach of breaking the problem down into its most basic parts, because we don't like to. I feel like a lot of people don't like to reduce the world into a materialistic sense. Like, oh, we're just a collection of atoms.
Yeah,
I mean,
because I think it also is so baffling that particles can rearrange themselves into us, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's just unimaginable. Like, we're just so complicated.
Well, the deeper
it's like,
thing.
how is this possible?
The deeper thing is that there's something deeper, right? And the deeper notion there is that information is holding it all together. Like, there is some, like, the atoms come and go in your body every 8 years or something. Every atom is recycled. You have a new set of atoms in your body every 8 years. So that means that your information is being preserved or conserved or something, like, or trying, at least. Your body is trying to conserve that information. Death is that loss of information, or the information cannot be processed any further, and you just disintegrate into atoms again.
Yeah.
Like, it's just it's rather perplexing that, like, the brain is another information integration system or something, you know?
Yeah.
This is where that information theory is starting to look promising again.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like there might be some more fundamental thing to information.
Yeah.
Or information is the most fundamental part of
existence.
Of existence, yeah,
Yeah,
somehow. Yeah, I feel like the information theorists might win at the end of the day at some level.
But I think we're way far away from kind of that. So,
But that goes to show that we don't have this at all pinned down. Maybe probing consciousness might help us get through hurdles in physics. I mean, that's what happens sometimes, right? You go into different fields and you emerge with completely new physics.
Right. This is why I think it takes a lot of people for this one.
Yeah.
it takes that cross-disciplinary approach because it does cover so many areas, right?
Yeah.
You need that.
And it probes the limits, too, of your understanding.
Yeah. Yeah. In all fields.
Yeah.
So.
Well, with that, folks.
What's the time?
Yeah, with that,
Okay.
we, I don't know. Would you just leave any question, I guess, for the listeners?
There's always a question we can leave. So I would say, leave us what you think about consciousness.
I mean, why not, right?
Is it, are you part of the materialistic camp? Like,
Yeah.
it can be described. We are just a collection of matter in a certain arrangement, and
But try not to go metaphysical.
I urge you guys, please don't go metaphysical because, of course, our I'm sure a lot of part of our audience is physics people anyway.
yeah.
So you guys, I think you can handle it. But yeah, let's stick within unless you really got a great argument to go outside of the universe. But this is kind of a I would say kind of a what would you?
I
what would you say?
wouldn't-
It's kind of an old or dead kind of argument.
I
That's
don't
saying
know.
consciousness arises from some metaphysical substrate. Or
right.
something.
The argument here is that matter is mind,
Yeah.
like that. Like,
Yeah.
like
And
existence.
definitely don't get religious on us. So.
It's sort of a
Those two are the caveats.
But okay. But the matter is mind that you're kind of like saying, please don't say it. I would say do say it, but it has to be. I want it to be compelling.
Yeah, if it's compelling, but it really better be compelling.
Because they're basically arguing, the matter is mind people are basically arguing the camp of a simulation. The brain simulates reality. Do you know what I mean? Like your mind is, the perception of reality is
well, I don't think that's a problem.
the simulation.
I'm talking about like saying that consciousness arises from some unknown particle or from some unknown substrate or something.
I see.
You know, like how it's like a soul or
thing.
something.
Right.
Like that's, to me, that's kind of like already bunk, because if a soul or things like that exist,
It should be
detectable and measurable somehow.
It should be an observable. Well, it's an observable for sure, but is it measurable?
Well, that's
here's
not
the thing.
considered. That's an indirect observation if you're talking about the fact that people are alive, right? I mean,
Well, you know,
we know the particle. We don't know all particles in the universe, but it should interact with the system somehow.
Yeah.
If you're controlled by a soul, that means it needs to be interacting with you somehow, right?
Right. Well, let me say,
if we can't measure that, then it's just like there's no point of even talking about that.
well, let me say this. I remember a long time ago, I was interested in this, like the existence of the concept of a soul and how people tried to, it's this mind, this duality. The mind is separate from the body kind of thing. How there was these scientists that said, well, if the soul exists, if this is a constituent part of your whole self, of you, and we know that E equals MC squared. No, there was a study. It was kind of an interesting study, though. They said if you die, and if the soul, quote unquote, leaves the body, you should measure a weight difference. If it's a tangible thing.
That's actually a good
if it's a tangible physical thing.
Good low level kind of experiment.
Okay,
right?
yeah, it was.
But it's silly as fuck.
This was like 1940s or something, 1950s.
That's still way too late.
And the paper was so silly. It was a scientific paper. I'm not kidding.
Yeah. At least that's real. Like, if someone who was a naive person said that, I would be like, okay. Like, I'd be like, that's actually a very good test. That's actually a very good test.
Energy,
experiment.
yeah, because they operate in the principle that there's an energy mass conversion.
Yeah, that's smart, right?
And that they measured bodies of people when they died.
Right.
They measured them right after they died, and subtracting the shitting and all this stuff.
Right. That's actually probably a very hard experiment, right? Because you have to literally keep the body completely intact with all its particles, right? And what if the soul is some immeasurable quantity?
Some 10 to the minus.
Yeah, it could be outside of the scale of precision. But yeah, anyway.
Well, they tried, and yeah, they didn't.
Yeah.
They didn't measure any discernible difference whatsoever.
But of course, you could just say that then the soul could. You could always push the soul outside of the limit of measurement, right?
I guess so.
So it's good to at least. That's a great experiment, though. At least rule it out that it's not within the scale of measurability that we have.
Yeah. I mean, that's not, but I'm saying that's not for lack of trying.
Yeah.
There are scientists that were trying to tackle the problem.
Yeah. But good for them,
Yeah. So
anyway,
yeah. So yeah, leave a comment.
Yes, guys, make sure to like, share, comment, subscribe, all that stuff. Check us out at Eigenbros.com. Check us out at Eigenbros2 on TikTok. Check us out on Instagram, Eigenbros, and check us out on Twitter, Eigenbros as well.
Yeah, one more thing. Actually, I think we're on iTunes, right?
Yeah, we're on all the audio.
If we're on iTunes, go to that, rate us, and leave a good review. Leave a good review.
Joe Rogan's on Spotify now.
Spotify doesn't leave reviews.
Oh.
But iTunes you can. And if you're a fan, please leave, like a good review. And yeah, that pushes us up in the science community, so that would be nice. So please rate us a good thing on iTunes and share, like Terence is saying. Yeah,
excellent, guys. And I guess that's it.
Yeah.
Right, Juan?
Yeah, we'll see you later.
See you guys.